Welcome back to another episode of the Family Astrologer, a space where we can delight in conversations related to all things family dynamics through the lens of astrology. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about C-sections and sort of some of the planning around that from an astrological perspective. And this is sort of a part 2 to my last episode drop that centered in on the implications of fate through the lens of family dynamics. And the fact that our birth charts are not just random, we don't incarnate at random. Our birth chart has sympathy with our family members. There's connections with our family members, which sort of makes a case for significance. It makes a case for fate. It makes a case for, purpose, that there's some sort of divine intelligence and purpose around the mechanism of astrology, around the mechanism of incarnation, and, the good and the bad, because our birth charts have a balance of positives and strengths and things that we're going to experience that are like awesome. And then there's going to be some hardships thrown in there too. So I think that family astrology is basically a system of astrology that sort of proves that there is some sort of influence of fate going on here. And that we're not just choosing our charts at random, the good and the bad, right? And good and bad has like a subjective line between it. And we talked about that previously. So something I've spoken a lot about with several women who are clients, who are friends, colleagues, followers of mine, is C-sections. Okay, I've had 2 of them. So this is something that I've given a lot of thought to as well. A lot of birthing people worry that, my doctor's telling me that I need to have a planned C-section, and I'm worried how this is going to affect my child getting their birth chart. I'm worried how this is going to affect that. And I want to say, I hear you, Mama. I hear you, parents. I have gone through the same thing myself. I have worried about that too. Something I didn't tell a lot of people was, and I'll tell you all the story about Leela's birth very soon, but she came late. And so I was in agony those last few days, like waiting for her to make her appearance. I did not want to go through that again with my second child. So my doctors said to me, Catherine, since you had a C-section before, as we get closer, you might want to schedule one just in case, And I said, after giving it a lot of thought, and I changed my mind several times, but getting toward the end, I was like, you know what? Yes, I am not going to be pregnant past my due date. And this baby's going to know that I would feel that way. This baby's going to know his mama would make that decision. And this baby's going to plan accordingly, is how I rationalized it in my brain. And I scheduled a C-section. And I just justified it in the sense that this child is going to get his chart no matter what. And maybe this is part of that process. Maybe him choosing me as his mom, he's going to know that I'm so uncomfortable that I'm going to want to plan something just for my own peace of mind. So I did. I planned a C-section. And he decided to make his arrival before that. So we didn't need that date. But I went through this whole astrologer brain of how might my scheduling this C-section affect this soul's mission on this planet in terms of getting the chart that he wanted, right? Or the one that he needed. And I just like to think that the universe always has its way. They say that a child, and this is just folklore, but they say that a child is going to whisper their name into their parents' ears before they're born so that the parent knows what to name their child. And wouldn't you know, my husband and I, when we were deliberating names, We both came home. We sat in the kitchen and he said, I came up with a name. And I said, me too. And he said, I like the name Nova. And I said, me too. And so we had both thought of the same name right around the same time and decided to share it with each other at that same time. And so I figured, oh, he did whisper his name into our ears. He did. So I like to think that there's something going on behind the scenes that sort of influences our decisions, perhaps, when it comes to making such decisions around birth. Like I said, I changed my name a million times, and you'll hear that too with people coming up with their child's name at the last minute. You'll hear that from a ton of parents of, I had this name in mind, and then at the last minute, I decided to change it. You'll hear that all the time. So I like to think that in having agency over our birth plan, if we do, that there's some sort of mechanism involved to support that. I don't know. That's just all I can think about. You all, I have Sun square Neptune in my chart, so I do, I verge into those realms sometimes of what's going on up there. Like, I know astrology helps me make sense of a lot of whatever's going on Earth, but beyond that realm, I don't know, but I do like to think about it and wonder a lot. So one of my friends recently was going through this too, and it brought this conversation that a lot of parents go through in their brain, especially astrologer parents, around, if I have to choose a day that this child is going to be born, I'm worried I'm not going to choose the right thing. And what I told my friend is that the universe is intelligent. The universe will always find a way. I've mentioned this on here before, that you'll hear stories of, I had my baby scheduled to be born at this time, but there were issues with getting the epidural in, or there was like an emergency and someone had to go in before me, or they called and rescheduled the appointment at the last minute. So what I said to my friend is that all we can do in these situations is trust. And my advice to an astrologer going through this sort of decision making is try to take the overthinking, try to take the astrologer brain out of it. What is your gut telling you? Would you pick Monday because you like that day better? Would you pick Friday so that your mom can be with you all weekend? What is your instinct telling you? Try to take the astrologer brain out of it. And what would you as an individual choose in terms of when you would like to have surgery, right? Because you got to think that might be part of it, of rolling the dice or listening to the whisper in your ear, so to speak. You can't overthink it too much. Because another thing you could do is you could go through the maddening process of trying to elect a chart for your child. That's something I didn't want to be in that position. So when I actually scheduled my C-section, I said, I want you to pick it. I said, I like Friday, but I don't know what time. So I want you guys to pick it. And I shouldn't have told the lady I was an astrologer, because she was like, yeah, now I feel all the pressure and I don't want to pick it. Because here's the thing, even if you elect in your brain like 9 a.m., that's going to be perfect. Again, shit can go wrong and the election could be thrown off, and then you're going to be in your head instead of in the moment about it. I like to think that the universe is intelligent and has a funny way of ensuring that your child is going to get their chart no matter what. And I like to think that the process of planning a surgery might be no different than another circumstance. Like, for example, for someone who goes into labor naturally, right? Like, it's all part of the experience of when they choose to go to the hospital, whether they choose to have a home birth or whether they choose to have the baby in a hospital, like all of these little decisions could be impacting the timing of that child's arrival, right? Working with a midwife, not working with a midwife, working with a doula, not working with a doula, getting an epidural versus not getting an epidural. All of these little factors are going to sort of influence, or maybe not, ask a midwife, like that baby's going to come when that baby's going to come, right? And I think it's one of the humbling experiences of becoming a parent is that we don't have control over who our kids are going to be or how they're necessarily going to turn out. You can only do the best you can, but you ultimately don't have control over who your child chooses to become for themselves, right? And I think birth is one of those initiations around it's not up to you. It's really not up to you. And so even though it might seem like it's up to you, when you're put in a position of choosing a time to have surgery, what if it's all just a part of the process in the same way that anything else is, right? The same thing like with, like, how do we know that that's not part of that child's birth plan, in order to get their chart? What if the doctor has to get involved and say, we got to get this kid out in time to get their chart? Like, that's the other way of thinking about it. I think a lot of parents think that by choosing to have the surgery, they're not letting their child have the experience of choosing their own chart. But what if that's their way? What if that's their way of getting the chart that they want? So I think that the best thing to do is to go with your gut, make the best decisions you can for your birth. Do what feels the best to you, whether you're making decisions about where that baby is going to be born or what day that baby is going to be born. I think you just have to go with what feels the best in your heart and in your gut, and then leave the rest up to the flow of the universe, because every baby has a way of getting their chart. And you have to trust that even if the doctor's saying we got to schedule that C-section, that might be part of that baby's experience. So yeah, because everyone gets their chart. It's not like we get our chart and we say, this isn't it. This is not it, because every chart works. So conversely, I've had parents come to me who got into astrology after they had babies, and they say, my baby was a scheduled C-section. Does that mean that they didn't get their chart? And the answer is no. The answer is that your child got their chart no matter what, right? Because there are plenty of people planning C-sections that aren't astrologers, and they're just going with their guts, and that baby's getting their chart. Now, something I know that the astrology podcast has talked about, and I think there was an episode with Chris Brennan and Patrick Watson, and they were talking about like electing, I think, Patrick's child's chart, and then also the frequency of planned C-sections and what that means. So that's a little bit of a different topic, and I want to touch on that here. And my thought, I listened to that episode years ago, so I don't really remember quite exactly what they talked about, but I know that they expressed some concern of all the day charts, right? Because that's something we talk about as astrologers. What day were you born? And if you were born on the sun's day, or if you were born on Mercury's day, Wednesday, or if you were born on Saturn's day, Saturday. And the thing with planned C-sections is that they are usually planned between Monday and Friday, but, during daylight. So another thing we look at in astrology is sect. Sect basically refers to, are you a day chart? Were you or a night chart. And we would decide that by the sun's relationship with the horizon. Is the sun above the ascendant and the descendant, or is it below? And the sun's positioning in the sky, which you could see visually as well, is going to tell you if you're a day chart or a night chart. And there's a lot of different ways that we could interpret a birth chart and do forecasting based on that delineation, based on if someone's a day chart or a night chart. And, we think of diurnal, the concept of diurnal, which is more what we would typically ascribe to masculine or yang qualities of active and, engaging with the world and of the world and active and visibility and that sort of thing, versus nocturnal, which is a little bit more what we would think of as feminine or yin or receptive or introspective and more internally focused, right? So what does it mean to live in a time when there might be increasing numbers of daytime births? And I would argue, what if it's a product of our evolution? What if it's a product and reflection of the evolution of humanity, in the sense of how many of us are expected to be on, how much of us are expected to be producing something, how little we as a society value people that aren't actively contributing, right? Because when we think about antiquity and we think about the healers of the village and how a lot of professions were able to just focus on their spirituality and their commitment to spirit, their commitment to healing and things like mothering, right? Or parenting, things like that, where it is sort of unpaid labor, and how that might be more of like a yin or a nocturnal way of engaging with life. And in today's world, there's not a lot of room for that. In today's world, there's like a necessity almost around hustle culture. And it's just, unfortunately, a product of the times, a product of the economy, late stage capitalism. I think about that a lot. Or social media, where people are broadcasting their lives. People are on all the time. People are expected to be on all the time. And I'm not advocating for those things, by the way. I'm saying that it is an issue. I wish that there was more of a balance, but arguably, we're living in a society that is objectively more diurnal in nature. So what if, in order to exist in this epoch, in this time of humanity, there's just going to be more diurnal people, I think. So I think that maybe we could look at it two ways of causality. Is this the way that the times are shifting, and so more people are incarnating with diurnal charts, or is the influx of diurnal charts based on these planned C-sections in the last 20 years contributing to this trend? I don't know. I don't have the answers, folks, but I do know that we do live in a time that is objectively more diurnal. So it might make sense that there's more diurnal people, right? So more diurnal charts. So that's just some food for thought. But I do believe wholeheartedly that no matter the circumstances leading up to birth, we do get our charts. We do get the charts that we are meant to have. And family astrology proves that. Okay, so if you're wondering, did my child get the right chart? Does it match up with yours? Because if so, then yeah, I mean, that's a way to prove that. Now, there's a caveat. There are charts sometimes that don't match up a great deal with the family. And there's an archetype for that. And that is called, there's two actually. And they're Aaron Sullivan's delineations of the black sheep and also the scapegoat. And we will explore those together in time. So yeah, there are times where a person's chart does not match up with the family, but there are reasons for that. And we'll get into that more in another episode of the Family Astrologer. But for right now, that was just a little bit about my thoughts on C-sections and how they are interwoven with how we get our charts and the concept of fate and the significance of connected birth charts in a family constellation. So for right now, those are some thoughts on that, and we can discuss them more together in the future. But for right now, that is all I have for today, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.